took this picture of a metallic craft as it circled his house. In 1978, a terrified housewife in Spain snapped a picture of these UFOs while watching the sunset. This footage was taken by an Australian TV crew on December the 31st, 1978. This luminous domed craft appeared to have a rim around the center and two large portholes. It maneuvered at such an incredible speed it left this track on a single frame of film. No known conventional aircraft can fly at such speeds. In 1978, the United Nations released statistics showing that since 1947, 63,144 UFO sightings were reported. That's approximately one every 4 hours. Even President Jimmy Carter had his own alien encounter. While governor of Georgia, he filed this 7-page UFO report stating he spotted a glowing object hovering for 12 minutes in the skies over Georgia. The report was personally signed by Carter himself. This dome-shaped craft was filmed by a television crew from New Zealand in January 2nd, 1979. We can clearly see the craft from the top. The disc appears to be rotating while emitting a blue glow. An identical craft was photographed in 1952 by a Brazilian journalist in Rio de Janeiro. Here we see the dome is visible from two angles and the side is surrounded by large portholes. This sighting was filmed from the parking lot of the Rio Casino Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. When the footage was enhanced, a disc-shaped craft can be seen with a dome on the top and a series of portholes surrounding the craft. In 1991, this footage made worldwide headlines. These two discs were videotaped in a suburban neighborhood just outside Ottawa, Canada. Both UFOs landed in what appears to be a prearranged site. This footage became known as the Guardian sighting. In 1991, eyewitnesses screamed as a photographer took this picture off Manhattan Island as a disc emerged from the river and flew off. This craft was photographed rising out of the water in Australia as it docked with a smaller dark object. This UFO was spotted in Denver, Colorado as witnesses watched from a neighbor's backyard. In the mid-1990s, startled eyewitnesses filmed these craft as they hovered silently in the night skies. In the months following, similar craft were videotaped on 3 different continents. It was rare that sightings like these gained much national attention. But President Ronald Reagan's speech to students at Falston High School soon changed all that.
Suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries.
2 years later, President Reagan made international headlines when he repeated the alien theme to the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
All right, Doug, if we could go back to the presentation. I hope everybody's warmed up now for tonight's topic, UFOs. There you go, click on it first. View, all the way at the bottom. Thank you. All right, let's see. So, I don't want to stand here with my back to you and read this, but basically a little bit of an introduction of why I'm doing this topic tonight. I like to ask questions. And the UFO topic is an interesting one, of course. And a favorite quote of mine, if anybody is ever familiar with Friedrich Nietzsche, but a quote from Nietzsche is, "Truth is a hammer." And sometimes when we want to get to the truth of something, we have to chip away. We have to keep chipping and keep chipping and keep chipping. Some things might be right, some things might be wrong, but it's the only way to get closer to truth. So tonight's presentation is taking a look at the UFO topic, and we're going to chip away at a bunch of different angles and ways to look at the topic. So what's going on here? Over the next 3 months, we're doing a little bit of a series here. I'll be presenting to you what appears to be 3 separate presentations. However, the combination of these 3 presentations is a journey to a larger story. So hopefully you guys return next month, in the following. But tonight we begin with the topic of flying saucers, which allows us to start this journey to investigate secret societies, secret technology, and cover-up of said secrets. So these are the three presentations tonight. Flying saucers, who's inside? This next one's going to be awesome. Time-traveling Trumps. Sounds crazy, right? But it's an interesting presentation. And deep state revelations. We always hear about the deep state in the news, and we're going to dig through that. So flying saucers, who's inside? This presentation seeks to ask if flying saucers might exist, and if they do, who or what is piloting them? Humans like us, beings from other planets, other dimensions, or something more complicated? While at times I may offer my own speculations or opinions, most of the material here tonight, in fact almost all of it, is being delivered to you guys from the researchers, directly from the people involved. So we're going to try to stick to the facts as much as we can with the source material. So tonight's presentation divided up into, part 5 and part 5. So part 6 sections here. Part 1, Germans in America, 1850s flying crafts and Argentina. We'll move into the Vril Society and talk about Nazi technology. Then we'll talk about from Operation Paperclip to Skunk Works, and then that's when we'll take our intermission. After the intermission, we'll come back. We'll talk about revelations of William Cooper, which should provide a lot new information that probably most of you have never heard before on this topic. Some revelations of astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And then finally, why do UFOs make Tom DeLonge of Blink-182 nervous? So we're going to take it all the way from the 1850s, pretty much go through a straight timeline all the way to today. And what's interesting, I wanted to bring the Tom DeLonge aspect into the presentation because it's part of the current, I don't want to say the UFO narrative, but it's part of the story right now. And in fact, today, if anybody looks at drudgereport.com, but on Drudge website today was an article pointing out that the UFO discussion is coming back into place because of Tom DeLonge. So just today, there was that article. So let's get started here. Part 1, Germans in America in the 1850s, flying crafts and the Argentina connection. And I know some of you came all the way from South America, or from the lower Americas to be with us here today. But before we get into the 1850s, we're going to talk about a specific phenomenon here, the mystery airships of 1896 to 1897. So what I'm going to try to do is we're going to talk about a specific mystery here that happened in this time period, talk about that, and then maybe go backwards a little bit and see if we can't figure out what that was. So the phenomenon begins in November of 1896 and lasts through April 1897. During this time we have hundreds of sightings, some with thousands of witnesses, according to newspaper reports. More than 1,200 newspaper articles in 41 states and 6 Canadian provinces were reported during this time. So just to show you some examples, here is the San Francisco Sunday morning, November 29th, 1896, viewing the mysterious aerial lights from the dome of the state capitol. The San Francisco Call, Wednesday, November 18th, 1896, claimed they saw a flying airship. The Bloomington Weekly Leader, Friday, April 23rd, 1897. It flies by night. Everybody puzzling over the great airship mystery. So we're going to pause on the airship mystery and let's try to go backwards a little bit and think about what maybe this could be. Now, during the research and preparing for this, came across this fascinating story, very fascinating. But what we're looking at right here is a cover of a book. It's called The Secrets of Delschau. Okay, so The Secrets of Delschau, written by Dennis Crenshaw, and the artist here in collaboration with Peter Navarro. And what we see is, I'm going to point this out because it'll become important, but what we see in the picture on the cover here is an airship with a man inside of it. And down here on the land, we see a man looking up and kind of drawing or painting what he's seeing. Okay, so let's move on. So the Delschau paintings, that's what the book is about. The book is about the Delschau paintings. Let's talk about what those are first. These paintings were found by a man, Fred Washington. He was the owner of a secondhand store. Basically, one day he was picking through a dump in Houston, Texas in the 60s. He found 2,500 of these interesting paintings. The paintings were made up into 12 books. They were done by Charles Delschau. These were originally they were discovered in Delschau's house by his family. After his death, that family stored the paintings, and eventually, at one point, they didn't think they had any significance. They got rid of them. They just sent them to a junkyard and or threw them out, and that's when this Fred Washington found them. Now, in the writings, so it's not just paintings, but it's all these paintings with a lot of writings with them. According to Delschow, in 1849, he traveled to Sonora, California, and joined a secret organization called the Sonora Aero Club. One of the members had stumbled upon an anti-gravity gas. This society spent the next 6 years designing and building airships. The paintings at the time were in the possession of Fred Washington, were then discovered by Pete Navarro. He's an artist and a UFO researcher. He was looking into that 1896, 1897 airship mystery, and then began hearing about, because it started to make local news. I don't know if it was Boy Scouts or high school kids. The story is they were doing a UFO presentation at their school, so they went to Mr. Washington's secondhand store. It was like, hey, do you have anything about UFOs? And he's like, actually, I just found these in the dump. And so it kind of made the paper. That's how Peter Navarro found out about it, and that's how it kind of grew from there. But Navarro would spend the next 27 years studying the paintings and realized that Delschow had placed a lot of coded information in the paintings. So not only do we have these paintings, and we have the writings of Delschow explaining what they are, what's going on with the Sonora Aero Club, and a lot of other things, Navarro realizes that the paintings are coded. This is just an image. This is the author of the book, Crenshaw, holding one of these paintings. So this is to give you an example of what the individual paintings look like. Now the interesting thing with these paintings is they currently sell today anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 per painting. So there are people out there with disposable income that are really, really interested in these paintings. So between $10,000 to $25,000 each. There was originally about 5,000 of the paintings. 2,500 are what were discovered in the junkyard. No one really knows what the other 2,500, what happened to those. So now moving along with Delschow and the paintings, the next little bit we were going to talk about, because I'm trying to give credit to everybody here, is from a presentation by Walter Bosley. And he was given a presentation at the Secret Space Program Conference in 2015 in Texas. And the title of his presentation was called The Emergence of the Breakaway Civilization. But he begins by talking about Delschow and the paintings. So this is Walter Bosley. Just a little bit of his credits there. He's a published author, United States Air Force Reserve, counterterrorism ops and consulting, a special agent in counterespionage, National Security Division, worked with the NSA, and currently a private investigator. So he does have an interesting background. Now, to kind of get back, to walk away from Charles Delschow just momentarily, because a lot of this is important and continues the thread through the presentation. Walter Bosley, as he's studying the Delschow paintings, comes across Delschow mentioning an organization called NIMZA. And in the paintings, in the books by Delschow, he's writing it NYMZA. But what NIMZA is the secret development of airship technology pursued in the 19th century by a Prussian nationalist cabal called NIMZA. And it's the source of this is what Bosley believes, it's the source of the modern emergence of secret space programs. Bosley believed that NIMZA is the transliteration by Charles Delschow of the likely acronym NJM and then ZA. So what he's basically saying is that from the Prussian language, this is how it would be written here at the end, the NJMZA as an acronym, but pronounced NIMZA. Charles Delschow comes to the United States, he's in California, NIMZA, so it ends up getting written NYMZA in the books. So Bosley says, well, to understand what this is, we've got to figure out what NJMZA could possibly be. I'm not even going to try to read those words up there, but this is what he believed that the acronym stood for. And when it was literally translated, he was working with a lot of German professors and scholars to try to figure out what would be the best translation of those words. And it came out to nationalist, hunting, flying object, machines, office, or department. So in other words, the National Exploration of Airship Program. So what was NIMZA's purpose? According to Bosley, he says it was a distinctly Prussian nationalist organization dedicated to a unified Germany's global superiority and active pursuit of influence and exploitation of the natural resources and industry of the Americas. One thing to note, as Bosley likes to mention and point out, that going back to the 1850s, there was no Germany. What you have is several Prussian states, and in this era, during that era, they were really pushing for unification. So it was the early days of nationalism. So what this essentially means is that NIMZA is a private group made up of Prussian nationalists in the pursuit of a unified Germany. So now let's go back to Delchau and talk about him. You can look up Delchau even in Wikipedia. Wikipedia characterizes Delchau as a Prussian born in 1830 who came to the United States at the age of 20 in 1850 and is now known for his artistry of airplanes and airships discovered decades after his death. And then it talks about, of course, the book by Crenshaw. The book, The Secrets of Delchau, by Dennis Crenshaw and Pete Navarro, tells the story of Delchau and the secrets the authors argue that Delchau hid within his artwork. Pete Navarro spent 27 years studying Delchau's drawings, writings. According to Navarro, the story of the Sonora Aero Club and their achievements had been cleverly hidden in his drawings using several codes and unconnected sentences hidden throughout the work. Thus, one would have to see all of the paintings to understand them. Here is a picture of Charles Delchau. So he was a real man, he did exist, he did come over here, and the story that we know of him is from him, is what he's telling us that he did in California. So now, Delchau says he goes to California, he joins a secret organization called the Sonora Aero Club. So let's get back to that. A secretive group primarily of and led by German immigrants who, according to Delchau, designed, built, and flew small, rudimentary contraptions which they called aeros in the 1850s, all under the watchful eye of NIMZA. So we're going to take a look at a few of these paintings here. So this is one of the paintings. This is a depiction of one of the crafts that Delchau painted that he was witnessing and seeing being designed by the Sonora Aero Club. Here's another one. Another. We can see the people down at the bottom there. There's a man up in the middle of the machine. And this one's interesting and worthy to point out, just because you see the man sitting down at the bottom, and straight above him, there's kind of what looks like a lamp shining a beam of light down. And the reason I mentioned the mystery airship sightings of the 1896, 1897 during those months is a lot of the reports said that these mystery airships seem to have a beam of light shining down from them. And here's another one. So Doug, if you could help me out, we're going to look for Bosley 1. So there is 2. Make sure we're doing Bosley 1. So if you could double click that and then go to View, enter full screen right at the top, and just hit the space bar.
Take a look at this one. Now, again, the 1850s, okay? And look at these wheels. Now, this, of course, is, those of you who are engineers and such, I guess, this is what the wheel looks like. This is in one position, but as you can see down here, this is another position that the wheel would, so it kind of moves. And the wheels, they're part of a magnetic type of device. We're talking about anti-gravity in the 1850s, okay? And that's what all these wheels represent. That's what these wheels would do. They would serve that purpose. And also for forward and reverse motion. These things did not, by the way, just go up and down. They went up and then they went forward and reverse and made turns, and they were very maneuverable, much more than balloons.
Okay, Doug, that's the end of that one, so if you could, there you go. Doug's doing a great job. All right, so view full screen again, or enter full screen. All right, Doug, I think I'll do that from here. All right, so let's connect. What is the connection, though? We talked about Delchau, the Sonora Aero Club, and NIMZA. So let's bring it together here. So according to Bosley, it's his belief that basically NIMZA was funding the work of the Sonora Aero Club. According to Bosley, after the Sonora Aero Club began to achieve successes, NIMSA sent a Prussian officer, and that's a quote from Delschau. In the paintings, in the books, in the writings, he says, one day a Prussian officer arrived to communicate that the intention of NIMSA would be for the Sonora Aero Club to militarize these aircrafts. So you have the Sonora Aero Club, the secret organization making these aircrafts. You have Delschau doing the paintings of them. And then you have NIMSA NIMSA sending a representative over and basically saying, congrats on your success, now let's start militarizing these things. The Sonora Aero Club leader rejected the idea of these crafts being militarized and soon after died. That's how those things always work out. So that was kind of the end of the Sonora Aero Club at that point. Now, moving along, things are happening here. It's important. Let's talk about in 1862 to 1888, we have the rise of the Second Reich. So we're going to point some things out here. We have internal conflicts result in a unified German Empire. Nationalism is promoted. They go on the gold standard. The military is expanding, and we have increased colonization and mining in South America, particularly in the Argentina area. They were mining for gold to sustain the Germany gold standard. So all this is going to keep tying in as we go further, but the one thing, just remember, we now are showing German operations in South America. We're tying it into this aircraft phenomenon, but we know they're down there in the South American countries. Of course, during this time, we're also having reported airship sightings in South America. Just some of the many ones that you can look up, but some of the recorded ones that you can go and get the information in newspaper articles and read about them. But 1868, we have a recorded sighting of an airship in Chile. 1880, Venezuela. And then an interesting story, there's a whole article about it. In 1897, in Texas, though, I believe he was a farmer, tells a story about how one day he's outside on his farm and this airship shows up, lands, and there's a guy inside, tells him all about the airship, says, do you want to come with me? We'll take a quick flight down to South America, I'll have you back before dinner. And so the farmer got to take a ride in one of these airships. So to summarize, we have German nationalists working on secretive flying devices in the Americas as early as the 1850s. We have a secret society of German nationalists that want flying devices militarized. During the rise of Germany's Second Reich, we have vast German operations in South America, and we have pre-1900 recorded airship sightings as early as 1868. But before we leave this topic, one last clip here, Dave, so Bosley 2. So view, there you go, right at the top, all the way at the top, space bar.
Let's take a look at it. That was drawn by Delschau in the 1890s. When I saw that, called a generator cone, it has rotation, it has a liquid applied to it, I thought, oh, that sounds familiar. Why could it be? This is what I think the generator cone was, a proof of concept, early rudimentary attempt at the same technology that the Nazis would pursue with the bell. It's even bell-shaped, okay? If it were shaped like a star or a square or a zebra, I could see someone saying, oh, no, that's not anything to do with the bell. But it looks like a duck and quacks like one right there, okay? So, you know, and if you want to go even further, you know, in the post-World War II era, we had the Kecksburg situation, and golly, what did that seem to be? But in my mind, what Kecksburg was, you know, either a captured bell or the captured bell technology, and they were, you know, playing around with it, and it was an American object and such. But I think the thread of connection where they got this stuff started with the Sonora Aero Club and what Menace knew and what they were doing in the 1850s, and through the German NIMSA connection led to the Nazis developing the bell. Okay, the engineers who developed the bell had to get the ideas from somewhere. I mean, it came from, you know, more than one source, but in my opinion, NIMSA was very much involved NIMSA representatives were very much involved in the development of the Nazi belt. And there you have evidence connected back to a German group, fooling around with the anti-gravity and lift and stuff, the kinds of things that are associated with the Nazi belt. What do we think about that?
Okay, Doug. So back into the presentation. Yep, view. View. There you go. All the way at the bottom. Okay. All right. So now we're going to keep moving forward in the timeline. We're going to get to the Nazis, but we kind of got it kind of hard to jump past the Vril Society. Anybody in here familiar? Ever heard of the Vril Society? Anybody? We got a few hands. Okay. So the information that I'm going to discuss about the Vril Society, just to point out where it comes from, this comes from Gaia.com. But we got to talk about Maria Orsic. During World War II, the Germans yearned for any advantage over their opponents. Whether it was technology, intelligence, or strength, they wanted to be the best of the best. When Maria Orsic, a young German nationalist, came forward to share her remarkable gifts, the Nazis were delighted. What they discovered about her was more spectacular than anybody could ever imagine. Maria could communicate with extraterrestrials. Maria Orsic was a medium and the leader of a Nazi secret society known as the Vril that existed in the World War II era. The Vril Society was established after Orsic received communication from extraterrestrials who had once lived in what is now known as Sumeria. These beings eventually departed Earth for the Aldebaran solar system. The Vril named themselves after the ancient Sumerian word Vril, meaning God-like. So after making contact with these extraterrestrials, Orsic transcribed the information. So she's this medium and she's channeling the information. And it's coming to her and she's writing down, and she ends up writing down the information twice in two different scripts. The first was a secret German Templar language that she had personally never heard of or knew anything about. The second version that she wrote down right after the first was an ancient language that historians commonly link to a German occult group known as the Thule. Most of these scholars are in agreement that this language stems from ancient Sumeria, where the extraterrestrials, according to this information, once thrived. Once the transcriptions were translated into German, the Vril were shocked. The ancient race had given Orsic extremely detailed instructions for constructing a flying saucer. These pictures here are pictures of the women, some of the women in the Vril Society. There's Marie on the left. There's some other ladies. The one common thing is they all had long hair. I don't know why this lady doesn't in this picture, but they were known for their long hair. And apparently, we're all from Western Pennsylvania. Many of you probably remember Troy Polamalu, but do you ever remember Troy Polamalu saying that part of him having that long hair is that's where his power came from? He said it, you can look it up. But he said he got his power on the football field, it came from his long hair. And that's exactly what these women believe, that their long hair, according to them and their beliefs, was part of helping them channel this information. So, Hollywood loves to share little things with us. The movie Contact, I'm sure most of the people in the room has probably seen this. You're at a UFO presentation tonight, so I hope you've seen the movie Contact. But real quickly here, the plot of the movie Contact. The plot: aliens send message to Earth, found by a woman who happens to have long hair. The message is decoded and tells us how to build a machine to travel through space. Sounds a lot like the Vril, right? Well, maybe there's one little thing that they did in the movie, in case we weren't sure if that was a connection to the story of the Vril or not. Doug, if you could bring up the clip, Contact. And then right at the top.
I've got an offset carrier here. I think it's audio.
Plug it in, plug it in.
Center that segment.
Centering.
There's our woman with long hair. Here comes the message from the aliens.
I'm working on it.
They're decoding it.
Try zooming out. There, freeze.
Reverse values.
Try zooming out again. Rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise.
What's going on?
Does anybody speak German?
I declare that games in Berlin at the celebration of the first Olympics of the new era has opened.
Get in the White House.
20 million people died defeating that son of a bitch.
All right, Doug, back to the presentation. So while he's pulling that up, so that's our insertion there, the contact, basically rated out the plot line there, the story of the Vril. Humans receive, well, in this case, a woman with long hair receives an alien message and decodes it, tells them how to build a machine to fly through space. And just to hammer it home a little bit more in the movie, they hide it, the aliens hide it in a Nazi Hitler video clip. So that's our Nazi tie in there with the Vril. So, moving on. Move into the Nazis. So, real quick, the source material for this next part here, we'll go through, and awesome, if you want to follow up this information, there's a wonderful documentary. It's available on Amazon Prime. It's free if you have Prime. It's called UFOs Reconsidered. And so as we go through this next section, that's where this information comes from. And they begin the documentary, and they kind of just, as their opening statement to talk about the subject, say, take the general person's initial thoughts about flying saucers. These saucers behave in a manner that is unlike the planes we understand. Therefore, they must come from a place beyond our world. That's just kind of where a lot of people start with. They're not saying that that's the case or anything like that, but that's just a starting point. But is that crazy? Is that crazy to think as a possibility? Well, they say at one time the very idea that the atom could be a source of energy was seen as science fiction. But it was known to scientists as early as 1919 until in 1945 when a bomb dropped on Hiroshima. So what they start pointing out here is you can take, in this case UFOs, and be at a point in time where people think it's crazy. And at that exact point in time, there's already scientists that know about the information, the technology, that the public doesn't discover or learn about until years later. So is that where we are with this phenomenon? So let's go to 1944, November 1944. Allied pilots began reporting strange balls of glowing lights following their planes. These would become known as Foo Fighters. Sunday, December 31st, 1944, the New York Herald Tribune says, "The balls of fire appear suddenly and accompany the planes for miles. They seem to be radio-controlled from the ground." Well, this is an artist's drawing here of just what these pilots were experiencing in the air. There's a plane, and we have these balls of light following and tailing the plane. Here we have a New York Times article. New York Times, Thursday, December 14th, 1944. Floating mystery ball is new Nazi air weapon. And we have some actual pictures here. But you can see in the top one, we have the plane, and then kind of the bottom right, the little glowing orb. The lower picture here, off the tail of the wing there, we have another ball of light trailing the plane. So we're going to talk about real quickly here the book Intercept UFO by Renato Vesco. He's describing what he believes these Foo Fighters are. So he describes them as a remote-controlled flying device called Feuerball, meaning in German fireball, a turbojet-powered armored disc built by German manufacturing plant. By day, they would be seen as a shiny metal disc spinning on its axis. By night, it looked like a glowing ball of fire. Inside, a rich fuel mixture over-ionized the air surrounding the disc, creating the fiery halo. These were designed to home in on enemy aircraft engine exhaust and was capable of creating damaging electromagnetic impulses that interfered with the ignition systems of the bomber's engines. Now, in the research by W.A. Harbinson, he says, Nazi officer Captain Rudolf Schreiber, an aeronautical engineer, was credited for designing a vertical lift craft called the Flying Top in 1941. A prototype was test flown in June 1942, and then a larger specimen was constructed in August of 43. Here we have, and I apologize, I can't tell if this is a picture or a drawing, but this is an image of specifically the Schreiber Flying Top. So this is the Flying Top designed by the German Nazi scientist Schreiber. But by 1944, at a BMW plant, Schreiber was already working on a grander design. Working with other engineers and physicists, they designed a craft that could reach an altitude of 40,000 feet and 12,000 miles per hour. After the war, Schreiber admitted to creating crafts, but claimed they were never flown. All plans and designs were destroyed so that the technology could not fall into Allied hands. Schreiber died in late 1950s, but believed UFO sightings were proof that someone had successfully advanced his original ideas. And then a side note here, in 1950, a rancher in Argentina, always going back there, reported witnessing the flight of a craft identical to the Nazi Flying Top. So, now in this book, UFO Crash, just to talk about Nazi energy technology. According to the author, Victor Schauberger wanted to find alternative energy sources for the Nazi Reich. The Nazi war machine used so many natural resources, it would be unsustainable. He built a 10-foot diameter vortex machine that operated diamagnetic levitation. He met with Hitler in the 30s to warn him about the Reich's need for alternative energy. Work continued on his machines until 1945, when he was captured and sent to the United States, where he was coerced into sharing his technological secrets. So we got a lot of technology going on here with the during the Reich and within the Nazi military expansion. After the war, England learns of Nazi air technology. So, Sir Roy Fedden, leader of the technical mission to Germany for the British Ministry of Aircraft Production, stated, "I have seen enough of their designs and production plans to realize that if they had managed to prolong the war for some months longer, we would have been confronted with a set of entirely new and deadly developments in air warfare." Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, in 1956, United States Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, head of Project Blue Book, once said, "When World War II ended, the Germans had several radical types of aircraft and guided missiles under development." And we have Wernher von Braun. After the war, Nazi rocket designer Wernher von Braun and 300 railroad freight cars were sent to the White Sands, New Mexico, loaded with V-2 rocket components for him to reassemble as America's rocket program. This program would evolve into NASA's Apollo lunar landing program. So we're showing all the technology. We're showing that after the war, we're bringing the technology in, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and we're showing it going right into immediate use into very important things. Project Saucer. After the war, a rumor that a top secret group within the Nazi SS called SSE4 had developed anti-gravity saucer propulsion systems. And going back to the research of Harbinson, according to him, only 2 months after the German surrender, captured Nazi U-boat crews under interrogation by the United States Navy revealed Nazi submarines had been delivering components, materials, and members of Project Saucer research team to a secret underground stronghold in the Antarctic. It's a fascinating story. Just this slide alone could be a whole presentation. But after the war, always keep in mind, we'll talk about this, Germany surrendered. Not necessarily, it's not like the Nazis were done. Germany surrendered. You have Nazis escaping. There's still these submarines. They're capturing Nazis. They're interrogating them, however they were doing that. And they're getting the information and location of these Nazi U-boat submarines out there still in the ocean. The United States Navy begins capturing these German U-boats, pulling the captains out and discovering what's on these U-boats, where they're going, and what technology that they had. So, as a response to the U-boat intel, in 1947, Operation High Jump, a U.S. naval military task force was commissioned. It consisted of 4,000 combat troops, so a lot of troops, 13 ships and an aircraft carrier loaded with seaplanes and helicopters. It was dispatched to the South Pole under Admiral Richard E. Byrd to find and destroy the Nazi stronghold. But here's what's interesting. The operation prepared for 8 months, but ended after just 8 weeks, allegedly having been repelled by superior Nazi aircraft. So World War II ends, Germany surrenders. We're finding out that Nazis are going down. As they knew the end was coming, they're taking submarines, technology, and troops. They're setting up bases in South America and apparently at the Antarctic. And whenever they go down there, they encounter something that they could not defeat, meaning this operation. We're going to talk a little bit about Roswell as we move along in the timeline here. July 1947, the Army Air Corps reported capturing a craft UFO near Roswell, New Mexico. 50 years later, in his book, The Day After Roswell, and that's him on the right, Colonel Philip Corso shared military concern that the Roswell craft displayed suspiciously Nazi origins. So this book came out, I guess, 97, I thought it was 98, 97, 98, called The Day After Roswell. And basically, Colonel Philip Corso, who was there at Roswell at the crash, but this is a great quote. "Let there be no doubt, alien technology harvested from the infamous saucer crash in Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947 led directly to the development of the integrated circuit chip, laser and fiber optic technologies, particle beams, electromagnetic propulsion systems, depleted uranium projectiles, stealth capability, and many others. How do I know? I was in charge. A matter of public record, I think the kids on this planet are wise to the truth, and I think we ought to give it to them. I think they deserve it." So ending part 2, over the next few years, United States flight operations would report numerous sightings over the United States, Canada, and the North Pole. Some crafts were even believed to have been Russian crafts, possibly advanced from captured German designs. So, moving on, again, we're still in this era right after World War II. So what's important to understand as we move forward, this is what's kind of critical here. And I mentioned, but let's go over it again because it is important. World War II has just ended, but the United States is immediately facing a new threat. The United States is now learning how advanced Nazi technology was. And although Germany surrendered, the Nazi ideology lives on. There are Nazi bases in Antarctica and South America. If that wasn't enough, the Soviet Union now also has access to this advanced technology, because when Germany fell, England comes in, they're stealing technology. We come in, we're trying to steal scientists and technology. And Russia did the same thing, and Russia was first, and Russia got a lot more. The United States cannot relax and enjoy the end of World War II. It has to play technology catch-up and super fast. So, Operation Paperclip. Right from Wikipedia here. Operation Paperclip was a secret U.S. program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, such as Wernher von Braun and his V-2 rocket team, were recruited in post-Nazi Germany and taken to the United States for government employment, primarily between 45 and 59. Many were former members and some were former leaders of the Nazi Party. The primary purpose of Operation Paperclip was United States military advantage in the what was now becoming the Cold War and the space race. The Soviet Union were more aggressive in forcibly recruiting at gunpoint some 2,000 German scientists with a similar operation in a single night. So we were way behind. So the United States develops Operation Paperclip. We're going to watch a clip here in a second, Doug. You can start getting it ready. Don't hit play yet. While Doug's bringing up that clip, we knew at the United States that it wasn't hidden that we were bringing people from Germany here to the United States after the war. But specifically what the Operation Paperclip was, because I think Congress had passed a law that said we cannot be bringing in Germans, Nazis guilty of war crimes. So what Operation Paperclip specifically was to not only get these Nazi Germans, scientists, Nazi leaders, things like that, people that had information on the technology and secrets, but it was to hide who they were bringing by kind of rewriting their stories. Oh, this person wasn't a Nazi war criminal. They were a baker or something. Just real changing their background to real mild things, basically lying on who we were bringing in. Doug, you can go ahead and play this clip.
Nazi scientists, some of them tied to war crimes including horrific concentration camp experiments, brought to the U.S. in a secret program to advance American security interests during the Cold War. It sounds like the plot of a film drama, but it actually happened, and on a large scale. The story is told in the new book, Operation Paperclip. Author and journalist Annie Jacobson joins us now. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
So these were top scientists in the German war effort, sought out by the U.S. military as the war was coming to an end.
That's right. These were Hitler's top weapons makers, and Operation Paperclip became a classified military program to bring them to the United States. It also had a public face, so there was on the one hand the truth about the program kept secret, and on the other hand the idea that we'll tell the public that these are the good Germans.
The good Germans, but they were dedicated Nazis, the ones you write about. We should say there are many, 1,600 in all,
Yes,
right?
yes.
You document about 21 of them, dedicated Nazis, some, as I said, involved in horrific stuff. What they did was known, right, to the people to the Americans who were seeking them out.
Certainly to the American military intelligence officers who were interviewing them. The idea that they were involved in war crimes was really necessary to be kept secret, and that's exactly what happened. And so in the book, I think I unveil a lot of the truth about this program that has remained clouded for decades.
So give us an example of one of the figures that intrigued you.
Well, I think one of the worst case scenarios was that the United States military made the decision to bring Walter Schreiber. This was Major General Dr. Walter Schreiber, the Surgeon General of the Third Reich. He wound up at a military facility in Texas.
And doing what?
Well, during the war, Dr. Schreiber had been involved in the vaccine program for the Reich, which sounds like a nice program, but it was actually a program to work on protecting German soldiers from these biological weapons that were also being manufactured. So he was involved in war crimes and concentration camps. He became a prisoner of the Soviets and then defected to the United States. We saw him as someone who we absolutely wanted here for his knowledge. So in the United States, it still remains unknown what exactly he did, only that he worked for the U.S. Air Force in Texas.
All right, Doug, back to the presentation. So not only were we going in there and scooping up Nazi scientists and bringing them back, we were targeting specific ones that we wanted so bad that we would have to figure out how we would basically capture them from the Russians that had already gotten them on some of these. So we're going to talk about the 1959 Avro disc. In 1959, the United States Air Force unveiled the Avro disc. In the public demonstration, the craft barely lifted. Following its embarrassing failure, flying saucer research was labeled a waste of taxpayer money, and in '61, the United States Air Force withdrew all participation. Doug, we're going to bring up a very short clip here. Everybody needs to see the Avro disc. All right, so back to the presentation. While he's pulling that up, not very convincing, right? I mean, if that's the evidence that you're putting out there for UFOs, of course, that's not going to look very convincing, and it's going to, lead most people to believe if there's UFOs out there, it's sure not man-made. But was the Avro disc program a bit of a smokescreen? Was it to portray that government or military couldn't possibly be behind UFO sightings? Was it to fool our enemies so that they would think we were not as technologically advanced as we were? They put this Avro disc thing in, and they put the footage out there. They said a few times I would put my own kind of opinions, and I think the Avro disc was a smokescreen just to say, we can't possibly make crafts that fly around, and we're shutting it down. Around this time, you also have Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, the Robertson Panel, and the Condon Report, all official government investigation programs designed to convince public that nothing out of the ordinary exists. A lot of these programs were put together and did a lot of great research and found a lot of really interesting things. Most of that information was kept from the public, and what was put in the reports that the public got was the reports that kind of said nothing going on here. Examples of, oh, it's just swamp gas, those types of things that we've heard. Did I skip one? Oh. So, kind of getting a little bit more modern now, we got to talk about Ben Rich at Lockheed Skunk Works. So Ben Rich was the director at Lockheed Skunk Works from 75 to 91. According to him, this is his quote, "We now have the technology to take ET home. No, it won't take someone's lifetime to do it. We now have the capability to travel to the stars. First, you have to understand that we will not get to stars using chemical propulsion." So Doug, if you could bring up, we just have a quick little clip here of Ben Rich and what was going on at Lockheed Skunk Works.
A dear friend of mine was named Ben R. Rich. He replaced Kelly Johnson at the Lockheed Skunk Works. And about 10 days before he died, I was speaking to Ben, but he told me, he said, "Jim, we have things out in the desert that are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend." They have about 4,500 people at the Lockheed Skunk Works. What have they been doing for the last 20 some odd years?
All right, Doug, back to the presentation. All the way at the bottom. Okay. So, kind of wrap up this section here. Just one other name to kind of throw in here to just kind of give some startling information. In 1990, a man named David Froning, he was a spacecraft design specialist. He addressed an audience of astrophysicists, astronomers, and with my spelling, E-engineers at a University of Arizona symposium. There he admitted rocket science was obsolete and replaced with modified field propulsion, anti-gravity, matter and antimatter conversion, exotic field tension, time travel, transluminal flight, faster than light travel. So that's the end of the first part here. We'll take the intermission now. Okay. We'll just let this group get their seat. All right. So now we're going to keep going here. We're going to keep bringing this modern day, but it would be impossible to do a presentation on UFOs. The topic is more on UFOs. Aliens comes into the question because the name of the topic here is UFOs, flying saucers, who's inside. And so far, I'm showing that there's a lot of human connection. It was unavoidable putting up certain quotes, especially from Ben Rich of Lockheed Skunk Works. We did mention ETs and aliens. But I want to have some fun here in the second half, so if you guys are okay with it, we're going to go off the deep end here a little bit more with the UFO and alien phenomenon. William Cooper, if you're into conspiracy theories of any sort, UFOs, aliens, government, Illuminati, secret societies, who killed Kennedy, this is your man. Check out William Cooper. You can go on YouTube, put William Cooper. All his old presentations are online. And very recently, he wrote a book in 1991. I won't get into some of the things because they get a little bit touchy. He wrote a book in 1991. It's startling, very startling when you read this book. In 1991, he's talking about things that didn't exist in 1991 socially, things happening that are happening today. But it's fun to go off the deep end here with William Cooper. So we're going to hear some really neat things from him. Now, like all good conspiracy theorists, true story, he was murdered. Not too long ago. He was actually, Bill Cooper, one of the reasons that he's interesting, there's a lot of people that like to profit and make money, kind of on things like I'm doing right now, giving lectures and topics. Will Cooper, wasn't making a lot of money, wasn't making a lot of friends, just putting the information out there. The only money he sold was when he would give presentations like this. He would videotape it, and at the end, he would take orders for people that wanted to buy VHS tapes for pretty much the cost of the tapes. The government harassed him a lot. He would keep moving around, and he eventually just kept moving to more and more remote places to get away. This is long before everybody had the internet and things like that. He would just go on nightly and do like a nightly radio show on just ham radio. So people in the area, I think the Nevada area at the time, could just go on and listen to him talking at night on ham radio. But anyways, let's get into it a little bit. So, well, just leave it there, Doug, it's fine. Real quick on his background, and then we'll get into the clip here. As a former Navy intelligence, so according to Will Cooper, he's part of Naval Intelligence, and everything he talks about, he says is based on reports that he directly saw while working in Naval Intelligence. And then again, I guess down there at the bottom I mentioned something. So I just wanted to build it up a little bit. This next clip, I'm just going to shut up for a little bit. It's about a 10-minute clip there. Bill Cooper. Next one down, Bill Cooper. Nope. Doug, you were like 1,000% here in the first half. All right. So, before you hit play, Doug, all I can say, have an open mind, think what you want, but there's some incredibly fun information here, whether you decide to believe it or not, and we could not do a topic on flying saucers without Bill Cooper. So, with that, go ahead and hit play.
The Roswell incident is a true incident. It did occur. It occurred near the city of Roswell, New Mexico. And what actually happened, there was a thunderstorm, a disc was seen flying over two cities in the direction where the wreckage was found. The disc either exploded in the air or hit something in the air. But whatever happened, we know it happened in the air because debris was found in two different locations. There were large amounts of small debris scattered over a ranch that belonged to a Mr. Brazel, who was an old-time cowboy. He was a very honest man and reported it. Several miles away, there was a large, intact, majority of the saucer, actually, or the disk, found on the ground with several dead alien bodies. The reason I say several is there are accounts that there were 4. I saw pictures of 3 of those dead alien bodies in a report called Project Grudge, which also included material from a report called Blue Book Report number 13. So, I'm not sure whether there were 3 or 4. I saw photographs of 3 of those bodies for sure. Really, it doesn't make any difference if there was 1 or 50. The important thing is that it occurred and that there were dead alien bodies that were not of this world. The technology was not of this world. We could find nothing within that craft that we knew anything about. We could not find electrical wires, we could not find vacuum tubes, we could not find hydraulic actuators, accumulators, control valves. We didn't know what made this thing tick. Immediately, it was classified secret. It was carted away. The press was told first that they had recovered a flying saucer. Second, that no, it wasn't a flying saucer, it was a weather balloon. When the local newspaper tried to put it out on the wire service was interrupted, and a message came across the wire to the local news service stating that they were to cease transmission immediately. What they were transmitting concerned the national security. The message was from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this is documented. The witnesses are still alive and have so testified to this fact. What happened over the next several years, really that's the most important thing that initially happened. The second most important thing that happened, and there were other crashes in between, the second most important thing that happened is that we found 2 discs in the vicinity of Aztec, New Mexico in 1948, which contained human body parts. Now, this caused the classification to go from secret to way above top secret because there was a great fear of a national panic. Now, this was before they ever did a study to determine whether or not they believed the populace would panic if the information of aliens were here was disseminated. But they knew that if they told the public, or if it got out to the public by some means, that aliens were not only here, but were flying around in craft which contained human body parts, that's another story altogether. Now, I don't want you to get real concerned about this, because your chances of being affected by it personally are extremely remote. The next really important occurrence was the fact that in 1949, again near Roswell, 2 discs crashed. They recovered 5 alien bodies from these discs, and in combing the area to make sure that they had recovered all of the wreckage and everything that they could so that the public would not be able to discover anything, and so that they would have everything with which to gain knowledge and technology from, they scoured the area by foot patrol, by jeep patrol, and by aircraft reconnaissance, and discovered an alien live from the crash wandering in the desert. They captured him. He was designated EB, extraterrestrial biological entity. The next most important thing that happened after they found EB came a few years later. EB became ill, and they tried to save him. They were unsuccessful. They didn't know how to go about it. But in an attempt to save him, and also in an attempt to gain favor with this technologically superior race, they began broadcasting out into space for help. We have one of your people here who crashed in one of your ships. We're trying to save his life. He's dying. Please help us save his life. By doing that, they hoped, number 1, to make contact, number 2, to make friendly contact Number 3, that the aliens would see us as a benevolent people trying to help one of theirs and would not attempt to destroy us or hurt us. Because we realized that their technology was so far ahead of ours that in any military confrontation of any kind, we would have had no chance whatsoever. E.B. died in June of 1952. As of the time of E.B.'s death, we had not had any answer to the message that we had sent out into space. The movie that you saw, called E.T., is the story of E.B. They have changed some things around to make it more palatable to you. The beginning of the story, he's running around in the desert. He's lost. The government is chasing him. In the real story, the government caught him. In the movie, the little boy gets him. And they form this symbiotic relationship. They're each getting something from the other. And it's a wonderful story. Well, in real life, the real life E.B. was assigned an Air Force officer to watch over him, become his friend, get as much information from him as he could, be his mentor, be his captor. And the same symbiotic relationship developed between E.B. and this Air Force officer, to the point where when E.B. died, the Air Force officer cried. He was deeply hurt. He'd lost a dear friend, because he had been with E.B. literally night and day since they had found him. In the movie, E.B. gets very ill, and everybody's very concerned. And the little boy plays the role of the Air Force officer. And you see that he cries. But in the film, he lives. E.T. Call Home was Project Sigma to attempt to make communications with the aliens to come and help save the life of E.B.
And now, Steven Spielberg brings us E.T., the Extraterrestrial. We will witness the arrival, the search, the desertion, the fear, the discovery, the friendship,
I'm keeping him.
the secret, the love, the warning, the signal, the mystery, the danger, the intrusion, the wonderment, the enchantment, the hope. The connection has been made. Universal Pictures presents Steven Spielberg's E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
The government, ladies and gentlemen, is giving you information at an unprecedented rate every day. They are trying to get to your subconscious and tell you the story of what has happened over the last 44 years. So that when the truth comes out, it is not a critical shock. You will be prepared for it. You will understand what has happened. In 1953, we detected large objects in space coming toward the Earth. They took up a high orbit around the equator. These objects were determined to be spacecraft intelligently controlled. We did establish communications with them. Arrangements were made for them to land. There were 3 landings in 1954. One took place at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. One took place at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The other one, do not hold me to this because I cannot substantiate it, but I believe it was at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. I believe that the aliens who contacted us, who were attempting to help us, who refused to give us technology, who wanted to help us with our spiritual development, I believe that that landing took place at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. But I can't get any verification from that from any source, so don't put that down as fact, put it down as a possibility. The other two bases, the other two landings I know occurred without a doubt at Holloman Air Force Base and Edwards Air Force Base. The first landing occurred at Holloman Air Force Base, where the aliens met with our intelligence officers. They reached a basic agreement after several hours. They were able to communicate. They left one hostage with us, his name was Krill, as a pledge that they would return and formalize an agreement. Later in 1954, they landed again at Edwards Air Force Base. President Eisenhower had arranged to be on vacation in Palm Springs. At the appointed date and time, President Eisenhower was whisked away. He actually disappeared. Nobody even saw the helicopter come or go, but he just flat disappeared. The press was really shook up. And if you read the newspapers during that period of time, you will find that the press literally went wild trying to locate him. They were given a story that he was taken to a dentist for a toothache. They never found a dentist that treated President Eisenhower. In fact, he was at Edwards Air Force Base. He reached a formal agreement with the aliens and a treaty was signed. This was played out in the movie that you saw called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Everything that you saw in that movie, except for finding the ship in the desert and the plains in Mexico and those types of things, was true. People were and are still being abducted. People were and are still being picked up and relocated, decontaminated, brainwashed, given new identities, and put back into society in some other location. It's for their own protection, really. In most cases, in some cases, it's a travesty of justice. People are being implanted. The implants were played out by the silly little tune that people got in their head. That represented the implants. They couldn't get this out of their head. They would have a close encounter with an alien disc, and they would hear this tune, and they could never ever get rid of it. And it drove them to do some crazy things. And there are people today who are being driven to do some crazy things. I know some abductees who wake up one morning after they've had an abduction experience, and they've got to move. And they've got to move to a specific place in a specific state, and they've got to do it right now. And they don't know why. And they've never been there before. And they have no friends there. They don't even know what the place looks like, but they get all their kids, they pack up, and they leave, and they go to Sedona, Arizona.
Have you recently had a close encounter with something very unusual? Who are you, people?
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed Bill Cooper. It's one of the reasons that I did the little contact clip when we talked about the Vril Society, just to kind of open your minds up to that idea that maybe Hollywood's dropping some things in there that they maybe know about or are being told to make movies about. But we have the E.T. and Close Encounters. And just to explain why everybody laughed there, just so I don't move on and everybody has that question. When he said about people packing up their cars and heading to Sedona, Arizona, and then everybody in the room laughed, because he kind of wrapped that up as a joke because that conference was going on in Sedona, Arizona. So everybody kind of laughed because they had all packed up their kids and got in their cars and drove in Sedona, Arizona to watch Bill Cooper give that particular presentation that day. But here's a clip I wanted to show you. We talked about Lockheed Skunk Works before, and just the idea of inserting things in the movies for no reason at all. But in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when our main characters are sneaking to this mountain that they're being compelled to, we see these contractors unloading wooden boxes in bins here, and of course we have Lockheed logo. And there it is again as they're running away from the army and they're running up towards the hill. Real quick, in a few frames, there's Lockheed. So, let's jump from a conspiracy theory guy to an astronaut. So, people usually take the word of astronauts. So let's hear what Edgar Mitchell has to say. As Doug gets that ready, Doug, before you hit play, what he's going to be talking about. So this is Edgar Mitchell, I think was on Apollo 14. I believe he was on the moon. He grew up in Roswell. He was a kid that grew up, he was from Roswell, where the Roswell spaceship craft. And he basically said after, his Apollo days, when he went back home and as he would talk to all the locals, he became convinced. He listened to their stories, what they saw that day, what those people, not only what they saw that day would happen, but they remember how the news was reported, what the news was that day, and then what was the news the second day. And they remember everybody in town being at the restaurants and the cafes and the diners saying, hey, can you believe what they're saying in the news? But anyways, let's just play this clip to hear it right from the mouth of Edgar Mitchell.
Joined by a distinguished American in West Palm Beach, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut, sixth man to walk on the moon. Many of the Roswell witnesses told Dr. Mitchell their accounts, which he says were later verified by a contact at the Pentagon. What do you believe, Dr. Mitchell?
Well, I can say, Larry, I have no first-hand experience, but all of my experience comes from what I call the old-timers that at some point in their, before they passed on, and these folks are all gone now, and because I was who I was, because I lived in the area, I grew up in the area, and because I was an astronaut, some of them wanted to get it off their chest before they passed on, and I happened to be selected to hear their story. And all of them, as I heard some of the earlier testimony, all of them were under very severe oaths and fear and penalty for talking, but they did want to talk. And at some point,
what do you think? Well, Dr. Mitchell, what do you think of Bill Nye's assessment when it comes to what happened, that this was a spy balloon?
I'm sorry, Bill Nye he was saying everybody's colored by their beliefs and not looking at the evidence. I'm sorry, he's not either. And I think he's totally wrong.
Let me ask you. Hold on, don't interrupt. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Mitchell.
Well, I eventually went to the Pentagon and asked for a meeting with the Intelligence Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which I got with another naval officer who had had many similar experiences. And we told our story, and this gentleman, a vice admiral, said to us, well, I don't know about that, but I'm going to find out. And called a few weeks later and said he had found the source of the black budget funding for this project, and that he was going to subsequently investigate, because if it was real, he should know about it. As a matter of fact, he should be in charge. That was his words. And so we did get calls from him sometime later, and a report much later than that he had found the people responsible for the cover-up and for the people who were in the know, and we're told, I'm sorry, Admiral, you do not have need to know here, and so goodbye.
All right, Doug, back to the presentation. Okay, so finally, we started in the 1850s, moved into airship mystery, the late 1890s. We went through World War II, Germany, the Nazi German scientists, what was going on. We talked about what happened after World War II. We started moving along with what Lockheed Skunk Works was doing, 70s, 80s, 90s. We have some fun with Bill Cooper. We got a little bit closer to the present day with Edgar Mitchell, but let's bring it full circle back to present day. And just one of the narratives going on right now is Tom DeLonge. Now, it's very hard to explain what the heck is going on with Tom DeLonge, but if you really, really want to know, if you want to get the full story of what his involvement is and what he's doing, the best background source, if you go on YouTube, if you follow the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, it's episode number 1029. It's an hour, 40-minute long interview between Joe Rogan and Tom DeLonge. I'm going to shut up and let Tom DeLonge tell the story, but the one thing to say, and then I'll let him talk. Essentially what Tom DeLonge's story is that he wrote a book called Secret Machines, where he's talking about UFOs, the cover-up, the technology, how it's financed, and everything that's been going on, how the United States has been working with other governments all along. He's writing it as fiction. Okay? And then he writes this book, but he's so dead on with what he's talking about, he starts having interactions with generals from the Pentagon. He eventually, the CIA kidnaps him for like 2 days to try to figure out why he knows all this stuff that he shouldn't know. That's what he says the background is. I think there's a lot of good information here. The other thing that's worth pointing out, Tom DeLonge is a Freemason. And he's a little bit secretive about that. Who knows if he's on some sort of mission or whatnot, but it's worth noting that he is a Mason. But anyways, Doug, we're going to play 3 clips back to back. To the Stars clip. So Tom DeLonge, basically he's running this company right now called To the Stars. Introduction, so you could just hear from Tom's words kind of how he got involved in the shortest time frame I could find. He introduces Lou Elizondo, who just left the Pentagon to join the team. And one of the reasons that had to happen and occur is, if they're still working for the government, they can't talk about certain things, but as soon as they're a citizen, suddenly they're a little bit more free to talk about these things because they're not directly affiliated with the government anymore. It seems to be some type of disclosure effort going on. Whether you believe what Tom and his team are saying or not, you have to do your own research on. But pretty much that same day that Lou Elizondo left and we do this interview, boom, Lou Elizondo hits the TV circuit. So go ahead, hit play.
So we have with us tonight the man who ran the Pentagon's backroom UFO program for years, Luis Elizondo.
Lou Elizondo, this is, if you take a look at the first things, whether it's the reports, whether it's the videos.
Up front now, the former Pentagon military official who ran the covert government program up until this last November, Luis Elizondo.
UFOs have captivated the public interest for decades, but they've always been dismissed, including by me, as the province of wackos. But that is changing thanks to some remarkable videotape and first-hand accounts from very sober people who are trained to identify aircraft. And that would include this video. It shows 2 Navy pilots encountering something bizarre off the east coast of the United States. Watch this. Okay, these are guys who fly for a living, who know what other airplanes look like, including those maintained by foreign governments, and they're totally shocked by this. This is one among many incidents like it, including many that have happened in the middle of the day to sober people, lots of independent witnesses at the same event, commercial pilots, military pilots, O'Hare Airport in the afternoon. None of them have obvious explanations. These are aircraft, apparently, that are moving in ways that appear to violate physics, that are flying very differently from any aircraft ever observed, and way faster than any plane that we know any foreign country has. What is this? Well, we don't know, because for some reason the Defense Department is not interested in finding out. Lou Elizondo is a former Pentagon official who helped research UFOs. He said the DoD is not taking any of this seriously for some reason. Mr. Elizondo joins us tonight. Luke, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So did I overstate that? Is there a growing corpus of evidence, not drunk people on a lonely rural road at 3 in the morning, but sober military pilots saying something that we can't explain is happening?
That is correct. You're talking about individuals who have very high security clearances. They are trained observers. We've actually paid them and put them through schools to be trained and very keen observers to scrutinize what they're seeing. These are individuals who we trust to fly weapons platforms, sometimes with live munitions, over U.S. cities and to fight and win wars on our behalf. And they're reporting to us that they're seeing something that they can't explain, and it's also being backed up by the video evidence and the radar data and other witnesses.
But these must just be weather balloons, right?
Well, the weather balloons that are expressing technologies that are far beyond our current understanding of aerodynamics, things that are maneuvering in ways that no aircraft that we are currently aware of has that capability to. Flight performance characteristics that are well beyond the threshold of what we would consider, I think, normal or routine for aircraft.
So they have no flight surfaces, no wings or anything approaching a wing, and there's also no obvious propulsion, so infrared doesn't pick up any jet trail or rocket exhaust coming out of these things.
Right, or a plume. There's many ways to have propulsion. You can do it with a jet engine, for example, right, a propeller, or a rocket engine. In this particular case, you have objects that are doing things, maneuvering in ways without any obvious sign of propulsion, and defying the natural effects of Earth's gravitational...
At what speeds?
Some are very, very, very fast.
Faster than our aircraft? Or
absolutely, hypersonic speeds. And by the way, without any obvious signs or signatures involved. So when an object's moving through the atmosphere, you would expect it to have certain signatures associated with that particular aircraft, whether it's a missile, drone, rocket. So for example, you might see a heat signature coming from it. You might see ionization of the atmosphere. Right. You might hear a sonic boom, which you normally would. It's an acoustic signature. In this particular case, these objects don't have any of those signatures.
So we know that they're not U.S. military because they wouldn't be flying near U.S. military aircraft as they so often have. And it seems like we would know if foreign countries had that technology. Look, I have no idea what it is. The bottom line is this is a potential threat, a grave one to our country. What is DoD doing about it?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of DoD right now because I'm no longer employed as a Department of Defense employee, but I can speak to what they were doing about it and what they weren't doing about it when I was part of the program. I think DoD is a very large, complex organization. I think it's very good at what it normally does, but in this particular case, we had a very ill-defined problem set. And so when you're going to the boss and you say, look, boss, we have something here, we don't know what it is, we sure don't know how it works, and by the way, there's nothing we can do about it. That is a very difficult conversation to have in an organization that is, its sole mission is national security,
it's
right?
I think it's terrifying. I mean, this seems potentially like one of the biggest stories of my lifetime, and I don't care if it's about UFOs or whatever you call it. Something that we don't understand is getting very close to our military aircraft, and the government isn't responding adequately, and I hope you keep sounding the alarm on this.
Yeah, I think, if I may, just very quickly.
We got 10 seconds.
Okay, you go to the metro, you see a sign, see something, say something, and we get an attaboy for reporting it. In this particular case, these pilots who are seeing something and it's backed up by other data, it's nothing.
It's terrifying. That's the essence of dysfunction. Well, thank you for that. I hope
All right. Oh, hello, check. You guys still hear me? All right, Doug, if you could get us back to the presentation. And for the sake of time, we're going to skip the last clip. So if you could just go back to full screen. I was going to play one more clip from a radio interview that Tom DeLonge did. But I think Lou Alzano kind of gets us back to the present day here and what's going on with that. So what I want to do real quick to kind of wrap this up. At the very beginning of the presentation, I said over the next 3 months, I will be presenting to you what will appear to be presentations on 3 separate topics. However, the combination of these 3 presentations is a journey to a larger story. So what we're going to do here to wrap up, we're going to play a little bit of a game. Those of you who might get on Facebook every now and then we see those things in our feed, in our timeline. It's a picture of something and we're not quite sure what we're looking at, and it says, click like when you see it. So what I want to do real quick is I'm going to bring up the next slide, and we're going to see how long it takes to get at least half the hands in the room to go up. So when you see it, that's all I'm going to say. Look at the picture. When you see it, put your hand up, and then and for those that still aren't seeing it, we'll point it out. Starting to get some hands slowly. Everybody's seeing it. You guys see the Trump? Top left picture. So right where we started with the Delschau paintings. We got some crazy stuff going on back then that led to everything we talked about tonight. In this painting, we got Trump. Anybody notice down at the bottom right on the same picture, Trump, top left? It's also interesting, of the 5,000, I did the math, there's a 2% chance of this also happening. I think it's coincidence. It could have been picture 0, or it could have been picture 1, 2, 3, 4, 77, 112, 312, 1,063. It could have been in the first half, the 2,500 paintings that were disappeared. It happens to be in the 4,500 range, which is odd because he's the 45th president. And then over here, same thing, 4,500 range. We have another one here, bottom left says Arrow Trump. And if you didn't see it in the first slide, it's pretty impossible to miss it here on the red, white, and blue stripes. So with that, we'll see you next month for the time-traveling Trumps. There's people in the room that I have to get out of here ASAP, and I apologize. So, but we'll take time here. If anybody I'll do like 3 questions if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, you guys have fun at the bar, grab some more food, tip your bartender. But does anybody have any questions?
What's your favorite cigar?
There's this wonderful Honduran company called JRE. I love them. Love them. Any questions? Well, I guess I answered all your questions. Well, I'm going to pack up. I got some things to pack up here. If anybody wants to come up and ask a question, feel free. I guess if we could hit the lights so everybody can see on their way out. I thank you guys for coming. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope to see you next month, because I got a lot of work to do on this one, because I want to take something that's absolutely crazy and insane and open your minds up to something that is not only crazy and insane, but has a really, really, really fun, interesting story. So, all right, we'll see you.
I love you. John?
Eric, I keep getting this. Let me get this off now. Doug, here is. Don't forget to pull your USB thing out. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Great.